I'm going to talk about it, but that doesn't mean I condone it or support it. I am responsible for the loss of a human life. And that happened at the end of 2015. Mine was negligent, accidental, a DUI negligent homicide. It happened in a parking lot. I was driving 3 miles an hour and I hit a shopping cart. The shopping cart knocked an elderly man over. The ambulance came and took him away. At the time, he was conversational. I was at his side. He and I were talking. I was arrested, spent 2 nights in jail, and then I was released. I hired an attorney and weeks went by and I heard nothing. Until I did. And when I learned of his death, it was very abstract because he had died some 7-8 days later and no one had told me. So by the time I did learn that I was responsible for the loss of a life, it took a long time for me to accept that, because never in my life had I realized that I was capable of taking another person's life. I thought myself to be a gooder person than that. But I had to accept the reality. And it took time. I doubted it for months. I thought maybe it was a scheme, that maybe it was not really reality. And when I found myself in prison, I was looking for Ashton Kutcher, waiting for the moment when I would learn that I had been punked. Because my situation wasn't with a weapon. There wasn't a direct cause and effect where I pulled a trigger and then someone fell to the ground. It happened out of my own mind and my own sight. And it wasn't until weeks later that I had learned. I've spent a lot of time contemplating the loss of life, the responsibility for it, the morality of it, the ethics of it. And in the decade since I've become responsible for the loss of a human life, I have had the privilege and responsibility of holding space for people who find themselves in proximity to stories like mine. I talk to other people who are also guilty of taking other lives. I talk to their families. I talk to the victims. And I talk to the victims' families. In all of those conversations, no matter whether it was the perpetrator or the victim or a family member, every single person finds themselves in a state of shock and disbelief. That the incident opens their eyes and their hearts and their minds to levels of horror that exist in the world that they had previously been naive to. And the reality is that once those doors open, they can't be closed. I sometimes think of the experiences that I've had almost like as if I had gained hundreds and hundreds of pounds and become huge, like let's say 1,000 pounds, and then I had lost all that weight and yet still had all the remaining skin. The memories of those experiences, the emotions, the scars, that all leaves weight on me. And I was the perpetrator. I wrote Tyler Robinson a letter, not to celebrate, not to support even, in terms of supporting action or behavior, but because I know that for those of us who have taken another human being's life, that is only possible when the wholeness that a person is born with has been crushed and taken away. And it is those souls who are most in need of support, of love, and of grace. Because we need those people for their information, not to celebrate it, but to understand why. Because for me, in order to accept that I had taken another human being's life, in order to hold that responsibility, I had to also look at my own trauma, because they're inextricably linked. And that's what I know about Tyler Robinson, is no matter anything else, I know that at some point his wholeness, that sacred, beautiful thing that makes a human, was compromised. I don't know if it was his parents or the Mormon church, probably a combination of the two, just guessing on what I know about my home state of Utah. But somehow he was made to feel shame and humiliation, and that he wasn't good enough. And we need to understand how and why that happens and how to heal it. Because it took me just as long to unravel that damage as it did to create it in my own life. And in order for me to understand the responsibility of taking another human life and what I needed to do so that it never happened again, to truly change my life, change my lifestyle, my beliefs, my ways, everything about me to change fundamentally, required that I understood the how and the why. Just because I talk about it doesn't mean I'm advocating for drinking and driving. It doesn't mean I celebrate that I took a human life. It's a tragedy. And I bear that burden on my soul every day. I live a life of service to victims, to families of victims, to families of perpetrators, and to perpetrators themselves. Not to condone what happened, but to understand the scope of people's suffering around what happened, and acknowledging that those emotions matter, that those experiences that people are feeling today matter, that Tyler Robinson's poor family has to grapple with horrible realities, that Charlie Kirk's family has to grapple with horrible realities. That's the universality of suffering with crime. Whether it's the perpetrator or the victim or the family members, it's awful for everyone involved. And if we don't want it to happen again, we need to understand the hows and whys. And we need to take the weapons away.